Hello, my friends. It's always a privilege and a blessing to share with you the things that the Lord gives me. For I know it's not only for me. I know it is to be shared with you all, and that you all to share it with others, and thus the word to be spread. Now, this is a unique message. The Lord gave me this one when I was contemplating, just how it is that we are to convince the world that it needs Jesus. So before we get into our study, before we get into our topic, as usual, we'll begin with prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, in the name of thy Holy Son, Jesus Christ, thine anointed, we praise and thank you, O Lord, for thy infinite love and mercy. We thank you, O Lord, that you are a God that seeks to enlighten his people, that we be not in darkness, that we be not confused nor lost, but has given abundant and ample supply of light and information and understanding, that we may walk therein. Help us, O Lord, to see what Moses saw. Help us to see you more fully, so much so that our lives will be aglow, that we will truly be that light that you have set us in the world to be your witnesses in this world, that you are. Guide my words now, I pray. May they be a blessing and edifying to thy children. In thy holy name, King Jesus, we praise thee, O Father, forever and ever. Amen. Now, I am a Christian, and as a Christian, I truly believe that the answer to all the world's problems is Jesus. I truly believe that. And I mean that in every sense of the word. From our individual problems we face, to all the problems in the family, problems in society, the problems on a global scale. Jesus is the solution to every single one of these, and by the grace of God, I'm going to show you that. Not only in a theoretical sense, but in the practical sense. So if you are listening to this recording and you are a non-believer, or you're not a Christian, by the grace of God, if you will entertain me for a little, you will hear my reasonings, and hopefully you do not harden your heart against the Spirit of God, because if you don't, you will see that indeed what I'm saying is true. And for those of you who are listening, who are Christians, then this will simply fortify your faith and your belief, and by the grace of God, give you wherewith you can answer those who ask you of the reason for the faith that is in you. So first and foremost, we'll begin by examining. We'll start to look at some of the problems in the world. Then we'll examine some of the problems individuals face. We'll examine problems in the family, in society. And we'll go through and see just how Christ really is the solution to these problems. For the sake of time, I will not name every specific and individual issue, but I will name categories of issues. So whatever specific issue you may have or you may see, examine it and see which category it falls into. And since the primary category diseases we'll be discussing, the primary categories we will be discussing are disease and sickness. We will be discussing immorality in society. And we'll also be discussing global warming and pollution, destruction of the planet. All of that under the same umbrella. So again, if I don't name your specific problem, see which category it falls into. Now, the earth is a ticking time bomb, and even worldly scientists who don't believe in God will tell you that. Right now they're saying we're about 2 minutes to midnight or 1 minute to midnight. For those who understand the doomsday clock. But regardless, Jesus is the answer. His way is the solution. Now, let's look at some individual problems that we face. Okay, we have sickness and disease. You have obesity, which falls under that. Depression and anxiety falls under that. And all these categories are all interrelated. The individual can have a sickness and disease. Society is sick. The world is sick. So this is not constrained only to the individual, but nevertheless, sickness and disease. Some of the primary causes. Let's look at the causes of sickness and disease. Some of the primary causes of that is overwork, lack of fresh air, lack of exercise, and by far lack of temperance, abstinence, and disobedience. All right, the lack of temperance, abstinence, and disobedience. Again, sickness and diseases, they generally come from taking in things that shouldn't be in and not having enough of what you do need. All right. And again, lack of rest, lack of exercise, and just plain old disobedience. Because God has simply stated to us plainly, there are things you are to eat and there are things you are not to eat. And he named them clearly. If you are among those who view that the Old Testament is old and it is to be thrown away, then you will reap the results of that. Now, in the New Testament, God said through Paul, he who destroys the temple of God, God will destroy him. All right? We are also counseled to, whatever we eat, whatever we drink, do it to the glory of God. How can God be glorified if we are destroying our bodies? How could that be so? How could God be a loving God if he would not give us counsel and tell us that if you do certain things, it's going to lead to the destruction of your body? So therein lies the number one reason as to why there is sickness and disease. Disobedience. God says, do not eat this, and we go and eat it anyway. Next, the body needs rest. We overwork ourselves. We don't get enough sleep. And even if we go to bed and say we get 8 hours of sleep, if we're not going to bed at the right time and getting sleep during the right time period, we're still not getting enough. We're not getting rest. We're not rejuvenating the body. Lack of fresh air. Most of us work indoors. A lot of us work indoors. And even for those who work outdoors, we're breathing polluted air. So lack of fresh air and exercise, sunshine on the skin, lots of these things contribute and cause disease. So God's way. What is God's way? Simple. Do not eat these things. What things? Unclean foods. What are they? Shrimp. Okay. Do not eat blood. People are eating what kind of meat are people eating nowadays? Medium rare. Rare. You bite into the thing, blood is oozing out. I mean, he says don't eat it, and you eat it, and you reap the results. Christ is the solution. His way is the solution. Shrimp, scallops. All these seafoods, all these bottom feeders and scavengers, crab, lobster, all these things. We're not supposed to eat these things. These things, we're not supposed to eat them. They are very detrimental to our health. And after years and years of eating them, disease forms, disease happens. Why? Because it's not healthy for us. It's not good for us. All right? And again, the principle is whatever is not good for you. So even if something was once okay to eat, and now because of certain conditions, for instance, fish, there's so much pollution in the water, so much pollution in the world now, fish is not good for you anymore because of the mercury level. So God says don't eat it. So the problem simply becomes what? Us not wanting to give up the things that taste good, that look good. Jesus proved that cures for diseases comes from him, and not just for the person who believes, who is of the faith, but he also proved that even those who are not of the Christian faith, that healing, cures, actual cures for disease, not managing symptoms, but healing comes from him. And you saw that with the lepers, the 10 lepers. One of them was a Samaritan, was he not? And he was the one that came back. Now, a Samaritan didn't believe as the Jews believe. So that shows that whether or not you are a Christian or not, your health belongs to God. He is the God of the living. Are you alive? He is your God. Just because you don't accept him doesn't change the fact. He is the God of all living. Another individual problem, which again, all these problems are interrelated because it starts with the individual. Society is made up of families. Families are made up of individuals. I can't do right. I can't do the right thing. Everyone wants to feel and know and believe that they're doing the right thing. But we know that we don't do the right thing all the time. And some of us choose not to do the right thing, and then we end up with a guilty conscience, knowing that we have done wrong. How is Christ the solution to this? Because he told us plain and simple, Jeremiah 17, chapter 17, verses 9 and 10. He said, the heart is deceitfully wicked. Okay? And he also tells us, how can you bring a clean thing out of an unclean thing? You find that in the book of Job. How can you, who are accustomed to doing evil, do good? You can't. You can't bring clean out of unclean. It doesn't make sense. Jeremiah 23:23. Can a leopard change its spots? No. No more can you do good who is accustomed to doing evil. So, he knows we can't do the right thing, but God inside of us, Christ in us, he will enable us to do that which is good, to do that which is right. What did Christ say when the rich young ruler came to him? Good master. He said, why do you call me good? Why do you call me good? Only God is good. All right. So, as we move on, Christ in us will enable us to do the right thing all the time. His Spirit will convict us of wrong. He will tell us, and he does. And ask yourself, answer this question. Every time, is there not a voice that speaks to you and tells you, don't do that? You shouldn't have said that. Don't go there. You shouldn't have gone there. You should go apologize. And every time when we sit down and we think, and we always say, I should have listened to my mind. I should have followed my mind. That's not your mind. That's the Spirit of God talking to you and telling you to do the right thing. If we obey that voice, we will be okay. We will be fine. Societal issues. Violence and crime. Included in that, you have domestic violence against mother, against children. You have immorality, rape, prostitution, pornography, inequality, which starts at the individual level. Someone thinking they're better than someone else. And which stems usually overruns into race wars. One group of people now thinking that they're better than another group of people for whatever reason. And that's not only for race, that can also be socioeconomical. Because I have money and you don't, I'm better than you. Because I drive a Benz and you don't, I'm better than you. You find that even amongst poor people, comparing one another. I have the new 4K TV Ultra, you don't. You have that old LCD. I'm better than you now. Why? Because you have what? Plastic and fiberglass in your house? How are these societal problems solved through Christ? Again, all these things start on the individual level. If Christ dwells within our heart, there's no way I can go and rob and steal from anybody, because I will obey his law. And his law says, thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not lust. See, rape begins with lust first. You have to lust after a person to go and rape them. Christ is the solution. His way is the solution to all our problems. Domestic violence. father beating mother, mother beating father, mother beating children, father beating children. If we follow God's way, and what is God's way in this matter? Is there anything in God's word that speaks to this? There certainly is. God says we ought to love our wives. Husbands, love your wives as you love yourself. Love your wives as you love yourself. Will I beat myself? Will I starve myself? Will I hold myself as a captive, as a prisoner, treat myself as a dog, speak to myself harshly and roughly? Absolutely not. I would never do those things to myself. So if I would never do those things to myself, I would never do those things to the one who I call wife. Will I beat my children unnecessarily? No. Will I abuse them? Absolutely not. I have to give account. I have to answer God for every single child that I bring into this world. How will I answer God? Telling him I abandoned my child, or I beat my child to death, or I abused my child, I raped my own child, I impregnated my own child. How will I tell God that? How will I explain that to God? Going back for a moment to the individual issue of not being able to control myself. That is at the root, that is at the crux of the individual problem. The loss of the ability to control oneself. Whether it be my temper, whether it be my attitude, whether it be my desire to do whatever it is I want to do. Stepping forward again back to some of the societal issues, which again are related, intrinsically linked to the individual issue. We have immorality in society running rampant. You have rape, prostitution, pornography, promiscuity. All of these issues. And how is Christ our righteousness? How is Christ the solution to these? If you understood what you were worth. Many times promiscuity is because a woman doesn't understand what she's worth. So she just gives herself away freely. But if you understood what you were worth, young lady, you are worth the blood of a king. Now, you have to allow that to sink deep into your mind and understand what it means that someone died for you. Men, if you understood the responsibility of bringing a child into this world, that you will have to answer for every single soul that you bring into this world. You have to give an answer to God as to what has happened to the soul that I have entrusted under your care. You brought this child into this world. You had a part to play in bringing this child into this world. Maybe we wouldn't be so promiscuous anymore. You see, the problem is this. We have lost our reverence of God. We have lost the fear of God to reverence him and the accountability to him. We've forgotten that we're going to have to answer to God for all these things that we do. But if that is forefront in the mind, no matter who is present or who is not present, whether it be your boss, your parents, if they are there or if they're not, God is always there. And we will have to answer to him for the things that we have done while we were alive. Some other societal issues, inequality, and that again starts on the individual level. Why will I treat one person better than another because of what they have, what they wear, where they come from, what school they went to, what color is their skin, how much money they have, or whatever, what they drive? Those are some problems in society. And if Christ, how is Christ the solution for that? See, Christ teaches the principle. His ways are the solution. And his way says that we should be no respecter of persons. In other words, no inequality. Not because one person has something or doesn't have something. All right. How often do we look at people who have a criminal record? We look at them as less than a human being. So not because someone has something or doesn't have something, doesn't mean you treat them any different. There's no reason, there's no excuse, there's no justification for inequality. All right. Let's look at some of our global issues, the global problems that we face. And when we say global warming, underneath that umbrella is pollution, deforestation. You have the ocean, the whales, the dolphins, the turtles, all these endangered species, the tigers, the lions, everything, nature, including the animals that are endangered, and the global pollution, all these things, poverty, famine, malnutrition across the world. How is Christ the solution for these things? Very, very simple. Very simple. If we understand that we must answer to God for the things that we have done, we would think twice about destroying nature, destroying nature's habitat. We wouldn't do it. Not even think twice. We wouldn't do it. All right? Because there's no excuse for that. Because we can't create these things, and we're destroying it. And we're destroying it faster. First of all, unnecessarily. That's number one. And number two, because it's unnecessarily, it's being destroyed faster than it can regenerate itself. It takes a tree over 100 years, like a California redwood or some of these great forests. It takes them hundreds of years to reach the length and breadth that they're at. And it only takes a couple minutes for us to chop them down. And in one day, we can probably clear an area as large as Orlando. All right? And an area as large as Orlando takes hundreds of years to regenerate itself. If we remember our responsibility and accountability to God, we wouldn't do these things. How is Christ? How is Christ the solution for these things? Again, you ask. Famine, malnutrition, poverty. Most of the world's problem when it comes to poverty is because a small portion of the world has more than they need. And thus there's not enough. Enough is not being spread around. Not that there's not enough, but enough is not being spread around. And there are so many devious, underhanded, and evil practices in the world. I have myself heard people purchasing other people's homes out from underneath them simply because they owe back taxes. Imagine you lose your entire home, which you yourself has saved your entire life for, simply because, God forbid, you fell behind on your taxes. Someone else comes in and pays the property taxes and gets your entire home. Imagine that. Now, how could the love of God be in you and you put someone else, a whole family, out on the street? Famine. Now this one, you might say, okay, how is that? Listen, God tells us plain and straight, there is a time to plant, a time to reap, a time to sow, and a time to let the land rest. We don't let the land rest. We disobey God and do not follow He is the original agriculturist. He is the original husbandman. He knows that the land needs a time of rest so it can rejuvenate itself. We don't do that. And so the land gives up. And it doesn't bring forth its increase. And furthermore, not to give too much credit to the land itself, to the dirt and the soil itself. It is God that tells the soil to bring forth and bud. It is God that tells the trees to now bring forth and bud and give your fruit. And if we disobey Him, He will withhold His blessings. He will. He has that right and that prerogative. We cannot look at Him and say He's unfair for that. If you have a child and you tell your child to do certain things and they do not do it, and you withhold your promise to them because they did not fulfill their end of the bargain, can your child look at you and be true in saying you're unfair? They certainly can do it, but is it true? No, because they did not fulfill their bargain, their part of it. Malnutrition. Yes, there may be food, there may be eating, but the food lacks the nutrition. Why? Because the soil again is depleted. Why? Because we disobey God. Jesus is the solution to every single one of our problems. His way of living and being is the solution. To live his life, he must be within us. For him to dwell inside of us, we must allow him into our heart, that he may change us. In order for these wrongs to be righted, we must be changed into his glory. In all actuality, the world loves Christians. They do. In the sense that they love their values. Understand what I'm saying? What type of employee does an employer want? They go to great lengths to come up with a model, a mission statement, core values and ethics. They want a worker that is ethical, one that's trustworthy, one that's punctual, diligent, hard worker, someone who's going to contribute to the company, not someone who's just going to leech off of the company. And in all actuality, this is a Christian. This is what employers want. They want and need Christians, because only Christians, true Christians, that is, practicing Christians, not just in name, but those that actually live by the creed. These are the only ones who are truly trustworthy. These are the only ones who are truly diligent and hardworking. Why do I say that? Why do I say that? Because an employer wants someone who's not going to steal from them. Only a Christian will not steal when the boss is not present. Why? Because they know they have to answer to God. And whether or not you call yourself a Christian or not, if you answer to God, you're answering to a higher power. And that's the principle. That's the principle of the matter. If you don't know a thing about a diesel engine, you will not question the diesel engine mechanic. He knows what that engine is capable of, what it needs, what's not supposed to be in it. Likewise, God is our maker. He knows what we need, what we're capable of. Why do we argue with him? Christ, our righteousness, is really needed. He really is the answer. He really is the solution to our problems. And the key, the primary issue that most Christians have is obedience to the fourth commandment. We don't want to accept the fact that his Sabbath law is still binding. Some view this as working for salvation. Obedience is not works. Obedience is the proof of love. If you love me, Christ said, keep my commandments. Keeping God's commandments is not working for salvation. We can't work for salvation. That's impossible. It's a gift. Ephesians 2:8. It's a gift. But we must obey what he says to us. And let's look at this. God says, keep my Sabbath. Let's see how many of the world's problems will be solved by keeping God's Sabbath. Let's look at this now. We began at the individual level. That's where we'll begin again. Most sicknesses, diseases, immorality, inability to control oneself, and all these things, we're going to see how keeping God's Sabbath is the cure for these things. Now let's look. Overwork, as I stated before, lack of fresh air and sunshine, and disobedience. God says, keep my Sabbath. Number one, that's obedience. On the Sabbath day, you rest. There is rest. On the Sabbath day, we go out doing good. So now we're not looking at ourselves, doing it selfish. Now we're selfless. Okay? On the Sabbath, we go out and we walk in nature. Okay? Fresh air, sunshine, trusting in God by obeying his Sabbath, number one, and looking away from ourselves, denying ourselves. Lack of control is because of the inability to deny self. So right then and there, we're practicing self-control, and that is a principle which will go through all our lives, every area and aspect of our lives, to be able to control our temper, control our attitude, control our eating, control everything. Fresh air, sunshine, rest. Right there, right there. Trust in God. Right there. Cure for diseases, right there. Right there. Cure for intemperance, right there. Cure for the inability to do the right thing, right there. Cure for the inability to control yourself. There it is, right there. And again, all societal issues stem from the individual issue. Okay? So, global warming. What does God say on his Sabbath day? Rest, rest, rest. Imagine one entire day, no pollution, none, no pollution going into the air. What a big difference that would make. Imagine one entire day, all the family comes together to worship God, to spend time together. Look at that. No depression, no alienation. Look at that. No anxiety. Right there, gone out the window. On the Sabbath day, there's no trading, no buying and selling. So if you have something, you give it away. You do not charge anyone for it, and you certainly don't keep a record of it. So on the next working day on Sunday, then you charge them for what you did on Saturday. No. All right. So famine right there, malnutrition right there, taken care of. Imagine one day, everyone comes together free of charge. Okay, and you give in abundance for them for the next week, for the rest of the whole week. So there is no lack, none. Poverty taken care of. Famine, malnutrition, done, taken care of. All the extra that you have, you give to those who have not, and they will not only be fed and clothed for that one day, but it will take them through to the next week, and you repeat. It repeats and repeats and repeats. No lack. Absolutely no lack. Save the animals, save the whales, save everything. God says do not eat meat. The original diet for man was plants, was fruits, vegetables, and grains and nuts. And trust me, there is more than enough of that for everyone to eat. And that was the original diet for both man and beast. So there it is. PETA, no animal cruelty, no killing animals. There it is right there. But because of a perversion of it now, a perversion of our appetite and our diet, we're killing off all the animals, and now everyone is rallying for save the animals. But if we obey God, the animals won't need our rallying to save them. We just need to obey God. Jesus really is the solution. He really is. And once these individual problems are taken care of within the person by accepting Christ into their heart, societal and global issues are taken care of. Jesus really is the answer, my friends. He really is. And I pray to God that you will see it. He's the answer in your life, in my life, for the world. I pray you are edified, my friends. Be blessed.